Book 2, in order, King's Blood. Who am I? I'm actually doing multiple reviews for the same series and trying to finish it out as a review series, thingamajigger. Let's talk about it. Hello and welcome to the Ponderings of Pete. I am Pete. If you are new here, I talk about fantasy, mostly fantasy books, but also some other stuff, random literary fiction books, random sci-fi, random just things that I find interesting and want to read. Thank you so much for coming. I really appreciate it. Go ahead and drop a like, a comment if you want to, if you've read this book or you want to read this book and you thought this was helpful or whatever. Yeah, give me a comment, comments. I love talking to people on here. And if you want to see more of these, go ahead and subscribe and hit that bell notification, hit all so it gives you all the notifications if you really, are ready for that. And if you're coming back, thank you so much. I really appreciate you coming back. Thank you. Go ahead and, let me know you're here and drop a comment down below. Say hi. Or tell me what you think about this review. Tell me what you think about this book. That's the most exciting thing. Let's talk about King's Blood now. So, this section is going to be spoiler-free, and I will eventually transition over into a spoiler section. I will let you know when that happens, so you can pop off if you don't want to watch the spoilers and you haven't read the book before. So, without further ado, let's talk about the book. So, King's Blood, non-spoiler section. Was it better than the first one? Yes, absolutely. I think Daniel Abraham does not work the same way as a lot of other authors work, where it's like, oh, explosive and amazing first book and then second book syndrome. No, he tends to build his stories up over time, so the later books actually tend to be a lot better than the first book in his series. This holds true in Long Prize Quartet, and this is it's holding true in this book as well. The first book definitely set up a lot, and we're seeing the fruits of that in this book. The characters, we have 5 POV characters. There were originally 4 in the first book, because we have a new one. And the first one, of course, is Dawson, who is a noble, and he's kind of just a little bit racist, maybe a lot racist. It just doesn't. He doesn't really talk about it that much. His goals are noble. He wants to save king and country, and he's consistent. Let's just say that he's consistent in this book. He doesn't really, I don't feel like he grows a lot in this book, but he stays consistent, which is nice to have a consistent character like that. The next POV character that I want to just mention is Cythrin. Cythrin is great, and she definitely comes into her own a lot more in this book. We see seeds of who she's becoming in the first book, and she's really starting to hit her stride here, just with everything that she gets entangled in and solving it and putting herself in a beneficial position, because this is all about power. Who has the power? This book definitely focuses on the nobles. Feels very Game of Thrones-esque in the power plays. We have Getter, who after the end of the last book, spoilers if you didn't know, the king's son is now his ward. He is tasked with raising the boy further and teaching him statecraft, of which we all know Getter is clueless. Getter just has no idea. And every way he looks, people are either overestimating him or underestimating him. There is nowhere in between at all. Now, of course, this actually changes in this book, I will say. There is at least one character that does not overestimate or underestimate Getter, thankfully, because it was starting to get to the point of it felt miscommunication tropey. To the like it was that prevalent that people were just like, oh, Getter's this. No, he's not. You're totally overestimating him. Oh, Getter's this. No, he's not that much trash. I mean, sometimes. But you're underestimating him. Getter is constantly floundering, constantly just trying to make his way through politics, failing. The pet priest that he has from the spider goddess helps a lot. And there's actually some really interesting interactions between Getter and the priest, and just how Getter decides to utilize the priest. And just Getter being impetuous is a very interesting thing in this book. It really shows just, a clueless person in power, essentially, which is really interesting. The last one that is not new would be Captain Wester. Now, Captain Wester, admittedly, is kind of boring. He obsesses over a certain thing for most of this book and then completely changes his mind, which is great because what he was obsessing over is just, not healthy. He doesn't do much in this book, which is fine. Abraham is definitely setting him up for a lot more in future books. Maybe I'll like, maybe I won't. I don't know. I'm kind of meh about him. And then finally we have our new POV, who is awesome. I loved her in the last book, and that is Clara, Dawson's wife. So Clara is a gem, and in the last book it was really nice to see her just doing things in her own way. She was there to support her husband, while mildly racist. She was also just trying to keep her family together, and she did it in a very good way in terms of the maneuvering she was able to do. She utilizes her skills to help her husband achieve her husband's goal, which was really cool to see her doing that, and I think Clara is a wonderful character. This book, at least at the start of the book, she's a little bit more in the background, despite having a point of view, and a lot of her point of view for the first part of the book is a lot of her just reacting to what the heck Dawson is doing, and is providing another avenue to advance the Dawson storyline in the book. In the back part of the book, probably the back quarter or a third or whatever, that's when she kind of starts to shine a lot more, and I really can't say much more just because of how everything went down. She as a character is forced into a situation and she has to make do, which is really great to see, really interesting to see. As I said before, this is a series about power, so all these people have had power or will have power or are on their way to power at some point in their life. So them dealing with how power is affecting them is a central theme to a lot to this book in general. Actually, I can think about pretty much all of them, mainly Cythrin, Getter, and Wester. Actually, the three of them are kind of focused on how power affects them. Dawson and Clara have different arcs. How the contrast throughout the book between Getter, Cythrin, and Wester and how they handle power is actually super interesting for me, just thinking about it right now, because they all reacted in quite different ways. They all have reacted in different ways. That's kind of my non-spoilery thoughts for this book. So let's talk some spoilers now. So I'm going to talk about each of the characters individually or possibly as a whole, but kind of go down the same list. First up, we have Dawson. I'm glad he died. He was kind of douchey, a little bit douchey, a lot douchey, really. And I didn't see anywhere else for him to go. As soon as I started the book, within a few chapters, I was like, Dawson's going to die in this book, isn't he? And it wasn't like it was supremely foreshadowed. It's just looking at his character. If this goes the way I'm thinking, especially with Getter and power, he's gonna die. Him, Getter, and Dawson was an interesting example of the miscommunication trope. I didn't hate it, but it was annoying because they were both just assuming so much about the other based on their reactions when, they were just trying to bluff each other out in an interesting way. Huge example of the whole underestimate Getter, and guess what? You're just gonna get screwed over. So I think Dawson's story came to a fitting end. Hey, relic of the old past is passing away. Maybe we can have a new structure now, or something along those lines. And playing into Dawson's death, I think Clara's reaction to it and Clara's storyline after Dawson's death was definitely the best part of the book for her. Just her trying to keep her family together, her trying to rise up, not necessarily rise up in the ranks, but just keep everything as stable as possible after his death was really nice. I really liked how Abraham portrayed that. And the final scene where Clara's like, yeah, they kidnapped me, and I told them honestly, I never thought about plans of rebellion. Until now. That last part, I honestly felt like could have started the next book. I'm fine that it was in there, but I feel like that you could have ended a few chapters earlier for this book and left out that part about Clara. It would have been just fine doing that. It is how it is. it still was a darn fine book. In the first half, her role was very reactionary, especially to Dawson's plans and stuff like that, versus in the first book, she definitely was trying to influence his plans as well as, just help his plans along, which, it was nice to have, like, a couple supporting each other. At the beginning of this book, I was like, do something, please, a little bit. But it wasn't until she was shocked out of that like, she actually started doing things to hold her family together, it was a sad situation, but understandable. It was great. Clara was just showing off all the things she cared about. Cythrin. Cythrin is literally the only person in this book not to underestimate Getter, which was really interesting. I think when she revealed that to the kings of the kingdom to the west, I believe, and her magistrate, of course, or whatever, the head of the banking clan. At first I was like, wait, how'd she get all this information? And then I remembered that she'd spent like more than a week in the cavern with Getter and slept with him as well. I do appreciate her following her instincts and being smart for who she is. Getter is the tragedy that's trying really hard not to be a tragedy. He's turning into a tyrant. He has these lying boards, which is super, super interesting and terrifying at the same time. Getter somehow ended up as regent, and he's very, very fortunate. Like, pure luck. Very few skills on his part. And then finally, Captain Wester. He was a bore. First, he started obsessing about Cythrin, which was really annoying, honestly, because, like, let her go, please. Finally, the leader of the troops, who is actually our heretic spider mage with spiders in his blood, they're gonna go find a sword to kill a king, which is super cool. This is another storyline that I felt like ended really weirdly. I felt like you could have shoved that into the next book, but they didn't do that, which is fine by me. I'm just excited to see them get a magical sword, which is super interesting. Yeah, I think Captain Wester will probably grow more as a character as time goes on in a good way, and I really hope that is the case. Otherwise, he's probably the least interesting of all of them. Regarding what I said about the nature of power in this book, and you have the contrast of Cythrin, Getter, and Captain Wester. Through Captain Wester's flashbacks, we see that, like, he doesn't value it that much. He simply just wants, a pleasant life. With Getter, we just see a lot about how he mishandles power, whether it's through his cullings, whether it's through just poor social skills. It just... what happens when an idiot gets in power is this guy. Getter. He's petty as all get out. Wild. I am looking very much forward to reading Tyrant's Law this week, or this month, sometime when it gets here. I really like this one. I hope the series kind of keeps this up with the character building, with the world building. It's very much a comfort read because it is just like typical epic fantasy, which is fine. I think this book does it very well. Thank you for coming. Thank you for getting here. I really appreciate you watching this. Get some rest because that's important. See ya.